pretty self-explanatory, energy in, energy out. But I do like, again, just the academic role of the textbook showing what that means on a cellular level. We already mentioned last week kilocalories and why metabolism is really a measurement of all of the chemical processes in every cell collectively. Way different than we just think in terms of just how many calories do I need to eat. But let's look at that breakdown in calories in, calories out. And this is important because it's not just numbers on a page. So Tyler, if you had a client sitting in front of you, maybe a couple, let's say it's like a husband and wife, so different genders, different genetics, how do you consider the differences they need in food intake? What's your process of considering, energy in, energy out?
Now, this is assuming I already talked to them about their preferences and or they just walk in and just start talking to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, so you're a great point. Like, you had to start gathering information, right?
Yeah, gather information, find out more about them.
Yeah, you're not just looking at them.
Yeah.
So tell me about that process. Go to the beginning.
So I just sit them down and start going over, what their daily intake looks like. Even if they eat out, 5 times a day, I need to know how much they're really eating. Because if they're eating, very little protein and a high amount of fat and maybe moderate carbs, it kind of shifts some ratios a little bit to give them a little bit more protein. But most commonly, I see a lot of people not really eat a whole lot of protein at all. Like very sub, 50 grams for, even a heavy person that has a lot of muscle. And so just finding those little things, I try and dig for, where their protein intake is currently, their fat intake. Usually it's higher, typically. Even the carbs are usually typically higher, so I try and bring that to a little bit more of a moderate level, depending on where their body type's at. Also, I find out where their activity levels are, because a lot of people they're not moving. They just need to move and do something, even if it's just walking every day or doing some kind of exercise for maybe 20, 30 minutes, 3 times a week to start off. I don't like to blast them too hard or do too much out of the gate, because it can create anxiety or overwhelming. It might be overwhelming for them, where at first it's motivating, but after a while it might be deflating if they're working out 6 or 7 days a week. So you have to start off slow, and once I find out where they're at with their intake, then I start give them a baseline of where they're at with their protein, carbs, and fats, and then the dynamics of the coaching every week is really where the money's at.
Yeah, it's a huge point. I often tell our new coaches and clinicians that, even as important as this is, I mean, you really want to assess somebody as well as you can and come up with the most accurate form of nutrient profiling that you can. It's not a one-off situation. It's not like you can say, okay, I was wrong, and so I blew that. You're still going to be communicating with them. You're going to have some interaction and see how fast they're losing weight, how slow, and you'll need to make some changes. So we do have in the manual an entire section on programming that really talks about those issues. So this is a place, if you guys get into, I believe it's chapters 7 and 8, so we've gone into a process of the clinical interview, which is what Tyler was describing there, all the things that you want to assess with your clients. And Tyler was really hitting a lot of these points, their current food intake and history, their social and work structure, that kind of thing. But then you're eventually going to need to really get into the mechanics of it. And so this section on program design helps you really start to decide how many calories does a person really need. And before I get too much into the differentiation of the macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats, let me reiterate again that a lot of the best studies that have been done for 100 years using different measuring techniques really do show that the basal metabolic rate, so that's the overall collective metabolic rate over time. So here we are sitting down at rest. We may only be burning 50 to 70 calories an hour right now. But as soon as we get up and start moving, even moderately, that could double. Then you go start doing some kind of physical labor or training, and that could triple or quadruple. But the aggregate over time is that basal metabolic rate, and that's not quite as high as most people think. Before you're adding substantial activity, most men average 1650 to maybe 1800 calories, and most women are in the 1250 to 1400 range. That's been shown pretty clearly with research.
Nowadays with social media that really hype up you can increase your metabolism by eating more, and well, you can, but a lot of people will think, oh, I want to eat 300 grams of carbs. I want to eat a lot more food. I want to be like that person, to be able to eat a lot of food. Where can I bring my metabolism up? Can you do that essentially and keep your body fat, lower?
Wow, am I glad you brought this up. This is a huge, huge deal. I'm gonna tell you a story about two different coaches I know. One who is a pretty well-known coach, and we have had to. Corey is a health psychologist, and Corey is pretty well known. So a lot of people, if they have clients with disordered eating, end up referring them to Corey. But we've had such an influx of clients who have come to us from this one coach, because this coach made it kind of a badge of honor or a goal to see how high you can get your food intake. And so he would make it a necessity for a client to say, well, we can't start dieting until you get your carbs to 300, or we can't start dieting until you get your calories up to 2500. And so he would have these women gain 30, 40, 50 pounds. They didn't want to.
Yeah.
They were gaining all that body fat just to inflate their metabolism. And yes, it's absolutely true. The more you consume, the more your metabolism increases, the heavier you are. If I were 250 pounds right now, my basal metabolic rate would be higher, because my heart and lungs and musculoskeletal system has to carry around that weight and that physical burden. But is that what you want?
No.
I'm going to gain 75 pounds of body fat just so my metabolism is higher. Now I can eat 500 calories more.
And now you're just going to lower your metabolism just by coming back down, just because your body's more efficient.
Yeah. One of the things I've done, so I started competing as a bodybuilder when I was like 20, and then I went on to be a competitive pro for about 20 years or so. And I kept a huge binder of all of my stats. Whenever I did body comp stats, I've got DEXA scans, hydrostatic, weighing measurements in there. All of my history of dieting is in there, so I can look at even anthropometric measurements. What my biceps or my quads or my waist was in different weights and body comps throughout this entire career. And it's so easy to plot in perfect linear fashion. When my body weight was 200 pounds, I could eat 3,000 calories a day, 2,800 to 3,000 calories. If I'm down to about 180, I can only eat about 2,400 calories a day. When I'm about 160, I can only eat about 2,200 calories a day. If I want to get down to 150, which is my competition weight, I can only eat about 1,800 calories. So yes, if my goal is to eat 3,000 calories a day, I just have to become clinically obese, and then I can do that. But for you guys, this is important, because you're probably going to deal with some clients that have very similar misinformation, and that's an extreme case where one coach would force his clients to do that. Another coach, kind of a generation removed, who's just looked at social media and has gotten into that fray of metabolic damage, reverse dieting. I got this question. This coach asked me this question. He said, hey Joe, love your work, been following you around. I got this client. I got a question for you, because she's like type 2 diabetic, and I just want to make sure I'm doing this right. She came to me and was eating about 1,400 calories, and she's 260 pounds, needs to lose weight. And so what I've done is, for the last 6 months, I've done a reverse diet, and I've got her food intake now up to about 1,800, maybe even higher, maybe 2,400 calories. And I said, so she came to you to lose weight, and you've added food for 6 months. I said, and I almost didn't want to hear it. I said, what has her weight done? Oh, she's gained some weight.
Even more on top of 260?
Yeah. Wow. But it was necessary to rescue or save her metabolism.
Wow, she has a pretty good metabolism at 260.
To me, guys, this is, if there was such a thing as malpractice for a nutrition consultant, this would be malpractice. Somebody with a serious medical condition, health condition, comes to you. They need to lose weight. They desperately need to lose weight to get their health under control. And you think that to increase their metabolism, you should spend 6 months raising their food. It's asinine. It's unbelievable.
They probably just don't know. They have no idea what to do in terms of. They're just probably like, what else is there to do? Let's just increase your food and try and increase your metabolism. Your metabolism must be broken.
Right. And yeah, you started this whole tangent here, which is
say
important.
And I say that jokingly. Yeah. It's
No, and that's what people hear, and you guys are going to get faced with this. And you know, in this whole phase of energy in, energy out, when you're looking at what's in the textbook, understand that there is that cost. Just like my very linear experience with my dieting process, if you are heavier, your metabolism is never going to be higher. It's not broken. It's not damaged. Most of the time, when people think they're not eating enough, it's because of food density issues. You know, you go eat a meal at McDonald's and you can eat 1 or 2 of those a day and you're going to be gaining weight.
Yeah.
Because they're 1,500 calories, saturated fat. But the opposite is true. That person might think, I don't eat very much at all. But then you take somebody and have them eat cleaner, healthier foods, and all of a sudden, what do most clients say?
Oh, I'm eating so much food.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm eating so much more now.
I've never eaten this much food and lost weight.
Exactly, and their calories are actually down. So this is why, again, guys, we are very macronutrient based in terms of how we suggest, even an approach for clients. But let's spend a little bit of time. I want to skip, first of all, section 8.5 is about health risks. So we've already talked about things like diabetes and even some of the things with cancer, and the fact that you guys, are not responsible for people's health risks. You should be referring people back to their physicians for anything that they currently manage. You should be sending them out. I had an email from one of my coaches, one of my diet doc clinicians, who copied me on an email from one of his clients. And this was a client who had a hormone disorder and was not compliant with the medication she was taking. She just didn't want to take this kind of hormone replacement. So she ended up in the hospital for 4 days. She was on an IV, and now she's asking her nutrition consultant, what should I do? And she's asking almost in terms of, okay, here's my endocrinologist. She's telling me this, but I trust you more because you're the one telling me how to make my physique look good. So, to hell with my medical doctor who actually cares about my life. And so now he's stuck in this position of, I don't know what to tell her because, she should be listening to her doctor. And that's exactly what you should always do is say, look, and this was my response back. I emailed her and him together. I said, man, I'm, sorry you're dealing with this. But you really need to listen to your endocrinologist. And she even made some recommendations for nutrition. I think you need to consider this because of your condition, because of the medication.